Yeah, so day 3 of Monerokon was absolutely packed with some really interesting content. I really had a lot of enjoyment doing this recap for this year of Monerokon, and I definitely want to do it for conferences in the future. I think it would be a lot of fun to just have like a recap like this, because it keeps me, motivated to check out these presentations. And also, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who've enjoyed it. So thanks if you've been listening to these. I know some people find these to be a little dry, but it's a good way to like keep your ear to the ground of what's going on. So yeah, the day started off with Juraj and his presentation, Fellow Monerites, Are We Lost? Now, Juraj, his name, by the way, is spelled Juraj. So if they did not pronounce his name when he was introduced, I would have been saying Juraj, like the uncultured swine that I am. But no, his name is Juraj. I don't know what country he's from. Actually, he's probably from like the Czech Republic, right? Or maybe Slovakia or something. I don't know. It's a cool name. But anyways, his presentation started off with a really interesting metaphor here, where he's drawing a parallel between cypherpunks and like hill tribes. So like he's saying like, back in the older days where you would have these like cities, and then on the hills you would have these decentralized tribes, and these tribes are not easily taxed. They have oral traditions. They're spread out, distant, and they're not politically active. And he draws that parallel to cypherpunks. Very true. I like that parallel a lot. I've never really thought of that. He brings up like they're strategically ungovernable, and that their invisibility beats confrontation. Because like if they were to like march onto the city to try to take it over, they would get squashed. So instead, they kind of just like stay back and do their own thing, and it's way too much work for the state to go after them. So they're kind of just like, we'll just leave them alone. Too much. And generally that's kind of how things are today, and that's kind of my outlook. Like as a cypherpunk, trying to be involved in like local politics, maybe that's worthwhile. I don't know, man. I kind of just view this as like a giant machine that's just going in one direction, and there's a lot of corruption inside of it, and a lot of people who aren't respecting my rights. So instead, I do one thing that I can directly protest against that, and that's using free and open source software and kind of cutting myself off of that surveillance. And it's a really effective way of protesting. Juraj, though, he starts talking about network effects and how Bitcoin has an advantage in that. And, I'm in disagreement with how he kind of takes this, because he then argues from the perspective of achieving global adoption, which I think is kind of in contrast to the rest of his presentation. Because like he's kind of going against his opening statement, right? Where he's like talking about being like hill tribes being like separated from the state, but now he's talking about how we should be like trying to get the network effect of Monero greater so more people adopt it. But like I thought that's the whole point of being in a hill tribe, like, right? Being separated from things, doing our own thing, passing down our traditions, by generation, instead of subscribing to what everyone else is doing. So I don't really understand why he shifted there. He also mentions exchanges being hostile to Monero as a negative. And this is true and false, like, or I guess you can argue it being true or false. Like, absolutely. It's not good from the perspective of, making it easier for people to get Monero. Absolutely. But the thing is, exchanges aren't going after Monero. They're going after the concept of digital cash. Monero just happens to be digital cash. But they're also going after Bitcoin. They're going after Samurai Wallet, right? They're going after coin join protocols, any type of privacy with Bitcoin, they're going after. It's not just Monero. Now, Monero being the image of this, well, that kind of just shows you that Monero's leading the charge. And I think that's important to notice, because like from this anti-government perspective, people aren't talking about Zcash, and there's a reason for that. This is why Monero is being used in darknet markets, and it's being used in general. It's because people associate Monero with, using cryptocurrency in defiance of the state, and this is what gives it its culture. And that's why it has this like clout and this presence, and yeah, it really snowballs from there. And also, he says that Monero's failed at number go up tech. I again don't really agree with that. I mean, literally, I sold my friend 2 Monero back in April for $400, and I just checked today, and Monero's $340 per Monero. So I think Monero's doing like pretty fine with that. Maybe not as well as Bitcoin, but I think Monero's doing pretty much fine. And he also mentions that drug dealers just have Bitcoin rather than Monero. That's just not true. I don't know where he's getting that from. So yeah, I think like he started the presentation off like really well, but then I think it just got muddy there. I'm not really sure what happened, but he finishes nice. He then starts talking about like eCash and trusted mints, and I like this. Not that I like those protocols, but he's like basically developing like a swap service of Monero into Lightning, where basically you like put in Monero and then it gives you like Lightning that you can then spend. And I think that's a cool concept, to have like Monero being used as like your in this case your savings account, and then you kind of plop it into like a service, and then it spits out eCash for you. So I think that was really cool. So anyways, yeah, that was the presentation. I guess I was kind of arguing against it. It was worthwhile to listen. Hopefully I didn't come off as debating too hard, but I had a bone to pick with how he's saying that Monero is lost, but I think Monero culture is doing actually fantastic right now. And really the price appreciation, I don't really think it's as dependent on people buying and holding it and developing that culture as much as it's dependent on influencers talking about Monero, because really that's all it's going to take. All it takes to get a cryptocurrency to pump is an influencer shilling it. And we've seen that time and time again. All right, so next up we had Robert Blinov talk about the value of peer-to-peer networks. And this was a summary of peer-to-peer networks versus a centralized point of failure. This was cool. He talked about Briar Chat, which I've actually never used. That's a peer-to-peer chat over Tor. That also uses Bluetooth if the internet happens to not be working. Talked about Jammy and Quiet, among other protocols. He talked about how even when you try to encrypt things, that there's metadata. This is a very important point that is lost on a lot of people. Metadata is really the problem. This is the issue of internet privacy, computer privacy. It's metadata. I think a lot of people get really stuck into debating like what cryptocurrency is more private. The cryptocurrency is like the tool, or it's just like one tool of like 1,000 different things. And like having like something being perfectly private is like impossible, because you're going to be leaking metadata in different ways. And it really just comes down to like knowing exactly what you're doing and doing everything possible to limit that metadata, right? So he gives an example of like talking about how the sound of electricity, if you're standing next to a like electrical tower, the actual sound emitting from it will change. And if someone has like a sound recording of it, or a sound recording of you, they can tell what time of day it is depending on that electrical frequency. And like you would never think of something like that, right? But the government has tools like this at their disposal. Doing Fed Time, he had a article or a video piece about how you can use like a CPU fan to tell what somebody's password is. Like crazy stuff like that. So it's a rabbit hole that you can go down, and you'll drive yourself crazy trying to like solve all of it. But to bring things back though, the point here is that metadata will always be leaked. So when you're working with peer-to-peer networks, it's important to really study them, understand their trade-offs, and to do as much as you can to make sure it's decentralized, that there's not like a centralized point of failure. So he also talks about like mesh networks, and he also talks about the difference between relays and servers. So it was a cool talk, kind of covering a lot of different things regarding peer-to-peer networks. Next up, we had Deki, who talked about Ayn Rand's ideas connected to privacy and crypto. Now, Ayn Rand, at least this is how it is in America, but in America, if you talk about being, say, pro-libertarian, like you have like libertarian ideals or whatever, the insult that is used against you is that, oh, you probably read Ayn Rand. Like, I don't know why. Like, I don't know where this came from. It's like this Reddit tier insult. Like, oh, you want to end the Fed? Let me guess, you like Ayn Rand? And the thing is, the people saying that insult, 90% of them have never read Ayn Rand. Like, you can tell, like, they don't really understand, like, what she was, like, talking about at all. Anyways, this guy was well-spoken. And he talked about how Ayn Rand wanted a gold standard, and that this would have been realized by cryptocurrency. And yeah, I do think, like, about these old-school libertarians, how they would have reacted to something like Bitcoin in its creation and Monero. I'm sure they would have been pretty hype about it. He talks about how objectivism, which is the kind of philosophy that Ayn Rand wrote about, how objectivism merges with cryptocurrency. So, for example, he talks about how self-custody is similar to individual sovereignty, or how immutable ownership is like property rights, or how permissionless systems are like how we can be our own bank, and how privacy by design is like someone who has rational self-interest, right? The best quote from this presentation, this is from Ayn Rand, is that civilization is the progress of a society towards privacy. The savage's whole existence is public, ruled by the laws of his tribe. Civilization is the process of setting man free from men. That's a good one, man. I really like that quote. So anyways, yeah, if you like Ayn Rand, you like Monero, check this one out. Next up, we had Joseph the Parrot, and this is called Beyond the FGC9. This one was hardcore, man. Woo! Now, what this guy's doing is he is making open source guns. Oh, yeah. Now, he starts out by saying that free money is not that different than free printed guns, and that 3D printed guns are attacking the monopoly on violence. Bam! Oh, man, that's hardcore. I don't even know if I can be talking about this on YouTube, man. And he has this whole chart, showing the gun rights of different countries. So, yeah, I mean, as an American, I can tell you right now that, like, a lot of states have pretty strict gun laws. It's definitely not like every state's you can just walk around with like a gun. Like, it's not like that. But depending where you are, it can very well be like that. He mentions practicality, invulnerability, and competitiveness as these three standards that they're trying to meet with their development. He mentions Jay Stark, who was the creator of the FCG9, which stands for Fuck Gun Control 9mm, which I actually did not know. I knew of the FCG9 because Jay Stark is relatively well known on the internet, at least. So anyways, he then developed the Urutau, and he goes into the technical details of that. And, he views this as an improvement over the FGC9, and he goes into all these details about how it's improving. And, at one point he does talk about how Sisyphus with his rock, it's kind of like the cat and mouse game of privacy, where we're always kind of, that game is just never ending, which is true. We can't relax, right? We got to keep moving forward. And he also talked about some interesting things with counter OPSEC, with like how fingerprinting can happen with different materials and stuff. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, ever since I started my job as a machinist, like, it's crazy, man, how talented like someone who knows a trade is. Like, if you're like not in that world. So like hearing him talk about this, making these like guns and stuff, it really is an art. Like, using a lathe and putting something like this together. But it does seem like they are like making it so it's actually relatively easy. So yeah, that talk was awesome. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you're into guns. We then had Sarang, who we had on day one, and he talked about mnemonic seeds for risky situations. So the mnemonic seed, that is the list of words that you have to write down. That is your private seed, right? And he talks first about how keys are generated, and then he talks about mnemonic devices, how that there's no universal standard, but the most common approach is BIP39. And he then talks about the methodology of how keys are generated. Okay, so he does like an overview of this, but then he introduces a problem, and that being border control. So let's say you're going over a border. How can you do that if you are a target and you might have cryptocurrency with you? And let's say we're in this future where cryptocurrency is used a lot. Well, how are you going to go over that border with a private seed? Well, obviously there's like a million different ways you can do this. But he's introducing this as a way of like, you're definitely going to get searched. All your shit's going to be looked through. How can you do this? Like, how can you go through that border, get thoroughly searched, but know with confidence that you're going to be okay? So he first brings up this idea of a border wallet. And I've heard of these. Basically, it's like a grid of words. And what you do is you memorize a pattern on this grid. And that pattern is your seed phrase. So yeah, he talks like a negative here is what if they just take away the grid, which is true. Like they could just take away, your essentially that's your wallet if they take away your grid, unless you can replicate it easily. So he says that's not really the best idea. He then mentions a brain wallet, which I think that would just be memorizing the 12 words. I didn't write anything down for this. I think that's what it was. But then he brings up his answer for this, which he calls emergent seed. Get it? Emergency seed, emergent seed. Very clever, like the name. And it's shortened entropy. You pick a block hash. So I think you memorize a block header or the number of the block, and then you only have to do 7 words. Yeah, I kind of got a little lost here, but basically it was about like making a customary short-term wallet for usage where you only, in this case, would have to memorize like 7 words and then the number of a block or something. So yeah, with stuff like this, like with his emergent seed solution, it does seem like you can get this really quickly, kind of thing, where you can establish a really like a private seed really quickly. I think that's kind of what he was going up for there. The next one was Sockstrace. Probably one of the more interesting talks for me because I've been really studying a lot of Tor lately. Been really getting into Tor and just network privacy in general. So the presenter was Jeremy Rand or Robert Mindo. I forget which one. There's only one guy who was able to make the trip, but it was Sockstrace. So sorry, I forgot your name. But anyways, it was a really great talk though, and he starts off by saying that privacy is not just on chain. If someone can link your IP address to a Monero transaction, the cryptographic protections won't necessarily save you. Right there, that sentence, he gets it. And there are so many like privacy like developers who don't understand the sense or like are seemingly ignorant to it. It's all about the metadata, guys. And network privacy is shit right now. It is the biggest vulnerability that Monero has and every other cryptocurrency. You know, like everyone's just doing stuff on the ClearNet. Like that's a massive metadata leak. And people like, I don't think they really understand that they're like totally naked out there. So then he says, just use Tor. It's not practical advice because data leaks can happen. Now, it's not saying Tor is bad. It's that if you're not correctly using Tor, it can be bad. And I actually had this happen to me recently. So, you know, I mentioned I'm doing a video on dark IRC, and I was also just doing Tor through IRC recently with WeChat. It's a IRC protocol. I'm going to be making videos, I think, on that as well. But like, you know, when I'm like learning about this, it's kind of like I want to make sure I'm doing this correctly and like not leaking my IP address. Because if you just go on IRC without doing anything, your IP address will literally be visible to everybody. So like if you're not careful, you're like doxing yourself. So it's really important to like know what you're doing, right? And you know, if you're like using Tor, but like your config is set up so you're also using like ClearNet stuff, like your IP address will still be there, right? So you kind of want to like make sure you're, you know, aware that you can leak metadata that will, you know, give away your identity. So with Sockstrace, you can actually detect proxy leaks or the connections that escape Tor. And you can do this by monitoring network activity at the system call level. So basically, it uses a Linux kernel feature called seccomp user space notifications. And this is a monitoring process to look at specific syscalls made by other processes. And you're able to like basically see if there's leaks happening. So you can handle these leaks in different ways. You can immediately terminate the leak, or you can log the attempt at it, or you can just log it. This is basically sandboxing. So he also gave an example where he was able to find a leak in Firefox when he was starting WebRTC meetings. So he was starting like some conference call, and the ability to flag the network system calls that look suspicious, even if they're not sending anything. And he said, you know, he made it clear that this is, you know, really valuable, and it has an edge. So then he compares Sockstrace to Tor Socks, which I'm familiar with. It's like a Tor wrapper, similar to Sockstrace. He also compares it to Whonix, which is a Linux distribution that routes internet traffic through relays, essentially using the Tor network. So there's like a lot of other protocols as well, but this one is new and it's being researched. Very cool stuff. I'm firmly in belief that this type of network level stuff, this is going to be the new meta going forward, and it's really important that we start studying this more. And that leads me to defeating spy nodes. Presentation by Rucknium, Boog, and me. Well, I just read the slides, but I was involved, right? And yeah, this was awesome. We got tons of positive feedback. Hell, the super chat today mentioned it. I mean, I got a bunch of people saying that they like this presentation, and yeah, it was awesome. I think this was like kind of stole the show of the week from what I understand. A lot of people were talking about, you know, network level privacy, and yeah, this is like really important stuff. This is why I'm so hard on Xano, because they're not taking this seriously. And if you're a project not taking network level privacy seriously, you're fraudulent. So anyways, yeah, it's a great talk, a really great summary of Monero being attacked. And that actually leads me to a new website made by Rucknium. You can go to moneronet.info. moneronet.info. I'll post a link. And this actually gives you a visualization that you can play around with of the suspected spy nodes versus the honest reachable nodes. And it has all these different graphs you can drag and drop and stuff. It shows the estimated number of honest nodes with blockchain pruning enabled, the estimated number of honest nodes with RPC enabled. It has a tree map of honest and spy nodes. It has all this like interactive stuff. It's really cool, and even has a IP address search thing as well. So nice interactive way of like looking at this data. And yeah, this is complicated stuff, guys. I really urge people to just spend some time. And if you've never run a node before, you really should learn how to do it. I am going to be making a node little mini series. I'm going to be doing a lot of content. Believe me, the content I'm making right now is, I have a lot of videos I want to make, and we are going to be spending time, talking about nodes in general. I will have like a basic how to run a node video. In addition, I'm probably going to make yet another like Tor video and I2P video as well, and talking about the differences between them, etc. Because the thing is, I'm learning right now myself. So really, this is really great stuff. So definitely check that website out and check this talk out too. So yeah, we got two more, and I'll be honest with you guys. At this point, watching these presentations, I started getting a little tired. I was kind of, so to be honest, these last two presentations, I was kind of on fumes when I was watching these.
Beep boop. Stop being lazy, Xenu. Beep boop.
No, I mean, I watched everything. Don't worry. I watched them. I just, I was tired at this point. Next up, we had Martin Arness talking about Monero after DAC8. So basically, this guy was actually very intelligent. Like, he was talking about like exchanges and like making doing your taxes with exchanges and like needing more on and off ramps and stuff. But this guy was very highly intelligent. I need to go back and rewatch this one, because he was talking about how he's been working with regulators and exchanges for a while, so he really knows his stuff. And he mentioned how when he was working, or he was working with Kraken, or he knew somebody working with Kraken, and how every single Monero incoming transaction that they would receive would be flagged just because it had Monero. I'm not surprised by that at all. Like, this is how they view Monero. Like, oh, he's using it, flag it. And we have this criticism of Bitcoin where it's like, Bitcoin is fungible or not fungible. Like, people argue like, well, if you have dirty Bitcoin, it's a problem, right? Like, therefore Bitcoin is a fungible. It's like, well, the way they view Monero is it's all dirty. And this actually goes back to, talking about digital cash earlier. The problem really is not them targeting Monero. It's targeting the concept of digital cash. That's really what's happening. So it really does not surprise me at all that he's saying like, yeah, they're just flagging Monero transactions going into Kraken. I don't know if that's like worldwide or if it was just in like Colombia, I think he said, but he had that anecdote. And he mentions how the end game is to cut off the easy on-ramps for Monero. 100% agreed. It's just making this more complicated for people. It's making it hard for them. And so anyways, this DAC8, basically, it's going to start January 1st, 2026. It's Europe only. And basically, tax authorities are going to begin working with chain analysis companies doing real-time KYC. And this means that the over-the-counter dealers will be targeted even in non-KYC off-ramps. And the legal burden will be on them to prove that what they're doing. you know. So, I mean, I firmly believe that, you know, any type of tax, crypto tax stuff, it's going to get worse and worse over time. It's you can already see it happening. And, you know, the gains that people are going to have in this bull run is just going to fuel this even more, right? Or people who are using KYC exchanges, if they're not paying their taxes, they're going to feel that, you know? So you have to do some creative accounting to be able to prove these origins. So anyways, yeah, cool talk. And lastly, Luke Szarmowski from Cypherstack talking about the math behind divisors. And, you know, sometimes I'll read, you know, the anti-Monero person out there saying that there's only a couple people working on Monero. It's not a project to be taken seriously. The math there is, it's nothing. It's just like, listen, show them this presentation because you got some freaking smart people doing the math with Monero right now. I mean, this is some hardcore stuff. It was funny too because like he starts off at the beginning of this presentation being like, yeah, well, I'm going to keep things easy at first, and then we're going to get a little tougher. And I'm just like, yeah, I got this. Yeah, you know, I got this. And so he starts talking, and he's telling the story, and then he's getting into the math, and he's talking about derivatives. And I'm like nodding my head, like, yeah, I got this. This isn't that bad. I'm starting to get a little cocky at this point. I'm like, okay, this math is really not that bad. Maybe those guys do have a point, right? And he's going on, and then the math is now getting pretty hard. And I'm like, all right, I'm starting to get filtered here. Okay, I'm starting to get filtered. And then he says, okay, that was the easy stuff. Now we're going to get to the hard stuff. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, I have no idea what's going on. And then it just got turned up, and I was like, I got filtered hard. Yeah, I mean, this is like very complicated stuff. Lots of formulas. If you're into math, you'll love this because they get into a lot of technical details. Now, this right here is the difference between a project that is serious and amateur hour. Okay, if you don't have researchers like this doing hardcore auditing and like math stuff like this, it's not a serious project. Simple as. But anyways, that is that. Monerokon 2025 was freaking awesome. I mean, I didn't go, but the talks were all very, very worth watching. I hope this was interesting for you guys. I will be at Monerokon next year. I'm going to make the pilgrimage out to wherever it's going to be. I'm going to do it. Now then, Robot, you have now listened to like an hour and a half of my commentary on Monerokon 2025. Can you please give me just one positive compliment that shows that you care?
Beep boop. Of all the Monero criminals, you are my favorite. Beep boop.
Thanks, I guess. I'm not a criminal, though.
Beep boop. Only criminals have something to hide. Beep boop.